Hello, everyone, and welcome to the .insurance webinar brought to you by Lexsynergy. My name is Marina Robbins, and I am the Marketing Manager at Lexsynergy. Lexsynergy is a global domain name management and online brand protection company with offices in the UK, Australia, South Africa, and San Diego, which is where I am based. We are pleased you're able to join us for today's call, and we hope you find this information useful. I would now like to introduce the presenters for today's webinar. First, we have Daniel Greenberg. Daniel is the CEO and founder of Lexsynergy. He is also an intellectual property attorney with over 15 years of experience in trademarks, copyright, domain names, and brand enforcement online. We are also happy to have Craig Schwartz join us for today's webinar. Craig is the Managing Director at FTLD Registry Services, which is the official registry of both .insurance and .bank. FTLD was formed by a coalition of banks, insurance companies, and financial trade associations from around the world. On this webinar, Daniel and Craig will be taking you through the entire registration process for a .insurance domain name. We will leave some time at the end of the call for questions and answers, so if you do have a question, please send those through using the Q&A function on the WebEx. With that, I'll turn it over to Daniel to start the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Marina, and I'd like to welcome all the attendees to this first .insurance webinar, as well as saying thank you to Craig Schwartz for taking the time to be with us today on this webinar. Jumping straight into this, the agenda for this webinar, we will briefly cover the new GTLDs, the new generic top-level domains. What is .insurance? .insurance's enhanced security, and who can register .insurance domain name, the name selection process, how to practically go about registering your .insurance domain name, the launch schedule, the costs associated with that, as well as Q&A. But like Marina said, if you have any questions along the way, please insert them into the chat function and we can deal with them as we go along, or alternatively at the end of the presentation. So jumping straight into it, the new GTLD program. This is a program where over 900 new generic top-level domain names were or are in the process of being launched, of which .insurance is one of them. And this is really intended to give the internet community greater choice. So, for instance, you could register a .bank, .cash if you're in the financial services sector. There are other domain names like .business, .global, .club out there. And it's within this framework that .insurance is launching, which is a restricted top-level domain name restricted to insurance companies. We'll get into that in a bit more detail. But there are several other TLDs that link into .insurance, as you can see from that list there. So it's quite important to pay attention and to be aware of these new TLDs as they may be relevant to your business. It's almost compared to the relaunch of the .com boom when .com was launched, I think about 20 years ago, where people try to grab suitable domain names for themselves, with the result that a lot of the .com namespace has been taken up by registrants. So to find a unique .com domain name is very difficult. So people tend to register long-winded domain names. So with the new GTLD program, this is a perfect opportunity to register a domain name that matches your trademark or business name, that is short, memorable, and that you can use to promote your business. In this new GTLD process, it's also very important to understand where the parties fit into the whole process. So FTLD, which is the registry operator of .insurance, they were the applicant for .insurance and they run the TLD. Lexsynergy as a registrar is accredited to sell .insurance domain names, and there are a couple of registrars out there, and we basically interact with the registrant. But as a corporate domain name registrar, we assign account managers for each client and hold your hand through the entire process. Just because it is restricted, additional information is required, and the process is not as straightforward as registering a .com or other TLD. So that diagram over there basically sets out that we are the party in the middle, the link between the registrant, the owner of the domain name, and the registry at the back end. I'll now hand it over to Craig, who will deal with .insurance in more detail. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Marina, for organizing this Lexsynergy-hosted webinar on .insurance and for giving us the opportunity to participate. We're very excited to bring another restricted top-level domain to the space, having launched .bank in May of last year. We're now very focused on .insurance, which is scheduled to launch in May of this year. And what we say is .insurance is a place for insurance providers and distributors to enhance and differentiate their online presence in the marketplace. That is when someone looking for information on the internet sees a domain name appended with .insurance, they can trust that it is someone that's been verified and vetted as a legitimate service provider in this industry. We say .insurance is trusted, verified, and more secure because of the registration restrictions. That is our limiting who can apply for domain names, what kind of names they can secure, and how those names may be used. We have a rigid verification process that's handled by a third-party service provider, Symantec Corporation, which is an industry leader in security and verifying the authentication of individuals. And we say that it's more secure because of the restricted nature, because of the verification process, and because of the various security requirements that we mandate that are not mandated in any other top-level domain space. So when you get into .insurance, you're operating in a much different place than .com, or for that matter, just about any other new TLD that exists today. Should we go to the next slide? So talking about .insurance's enhanced security, so we mandate a number of practices that are the responsibility of either FTLD as the registry operator, the responsibility of our contracted registrars, such as Lexsynergy, or the end user, those entities that would buy insurance domain names. And so it could be an insurance company, a carrier, an agency, a brokerage. We have a couple of different categories of eligible registrants, and I think Daniel will get into that a little bit more in his talk. But we do have mandatory verification when the domain name is first registered, and it's that entity Symantec that does that on our behalf. They will verify that the entity applying for the domain name is a legal entity, and if it's a regulated entity, that it's in good standing with its regulatory authority. They will also verify that the person that's applying for the domain name is a full-time employee of the insurance company or agency, depending on what it is. And they will also verify that that person registering the domain name is authorized by their employer to do that. And that verification process happens partially through using independently and verifiable third-party databases, such as regulatory authority databases. But there's also a manual component to that where Symantec will call the registrant organization to perform the verification process. And then we have mandatory re-verification of registration data every 2 years or when the domain name is renewed, whichever comes first. So if you register a domain name only for one term or 1 year and you renew annually, there'll be a verification every year, versus if you register a domain name for up to 10 years, then you're going to see renewal verifications initially and then every 2 years after that until the renewal date comes up. So there are also a number of security mechanisms, and domain name system security extensions is one of those. And for any of these security elements, there are a variety of parties that can help you implement them. It might be something your registrar can assist with. It might be something your hosting company can help you with. It also might be that you use an independent DNS service provider, So there are a variety of organizations that can help you fulfill these security requirements. So DNSSEC, or Domain Name System Security Extensions, is intended to ensure that users that are trying to get to a specific website, that when they get to that name, that they are actually where they expect it to be. It's a cryptographic process that happens in the background, far too technical probably for this phone call, but it's a way to ensure that your visitors are getting to the place that you want them to get to. Email authentication is largely created to mitigate spoofing and phishing and other malicious activities that are propagated through emails to unsuspecting users. And again, depending on what you use your domain names for, setting up your email authentication policy is pretty easy and pretty straightforward. And again, your registrar or others may be able to help you with that. Multi-factor authentication is something that we as the registry and the registrar, such as Lexsynergy requires when you access registry data in their system. So if you are a Lexsynergy customer and you want to change some information associated with your registration data, Lexsynergy will prompt you for multi-factor authentication credentials. And the reason that we have this both at the registry and registrar levels is to ensure that changes to registration data are only made by authorized users of the registered entity. Strong encryption practices are to ensure that the integrity of communications that pass over the internet are safe, and we do mandate that at a certain level. Those are all provided on our website in great detail. And then lastly, the prohibition of proxy and privacy registration services. There are registrars and other companies that will sell services that effectively enable a registrant or someone who's registering a domain name to hide or shield their true identity behind a proxy registration service. And at the early stages of the formation of FTLD and the development of our application for .insurance and .bank, we heard very frequently from law enforcement that tracking down the bad guys in a space where proxy and privacy registrations are permitted makes it very, very difficult for them. So we took the position, and it's really consistent with what law enforcement has requested in order to make their jobs easier, is that we just don't provide those hidden services for .insurance domain names. We do display the legal name of the applicant as well as the underlying contact information for the person and the entity that has applied for the name. So it's these enhanced security features plus the verification plus the registration restrictions that together make this a trusted, verified, and more secure space. Daniel, I think it's back to you.
Great. So thank you, Craig, for that. I just wanted to add one more aspect onto that is obviously with our experience with .bank, which, as Craig said, launched last year, May, we found that a lot of clients were overwhelmed with the technical requirements that they needed to have in place to operate their .bank domain name. So what we've done with .insurance is when you register a domain name with us, a .insurance domain name, we will provide free of charge the technical requirements. So that includes DNSSEC, DMARC, and everything else that requires you to use that domain name. It just helps with the process and allows you to get to a point to use it much sooner than trying to bring on third parties, although the system does cater for allowing third-party vendors to come on board if they can provide those technical resources. Then moving on, who can register a .insurance domain name? It is a restricted TLD, as Craig mentioned, in that you have to be an insurance company, a licensed insurance agent, agency or broker, and then associations of those two that I mentioned, group of associations as well. And as part of the registration process, you'll be required to provide the name of the government authority that regulates insurance companies or agents and brokers in your particular country, as well as providing a number, which is normally your accreditation or registration number with that organization. It's also possible for service providers that work within that industry to register .insurance domain names, as well as government regulators. It is quite strict, so it's very important to make sure that the correct entity is applying for the domain name, and that is where our account managers and our services apply, in that we will pre-vet that for you to make sure that the correct entity is applying for that domain name. In some cases, the person may be a reseller of a reseller and may not have the authority to register a particular domain name. So we'd pick that up in right at the beginning so that the application is submitted correctly. The name selection process, so FTLD have set out standard name requirements. So first of all, the domain name needs to match or correspond to your trademark. That's a registered trademark and a trade name, which is not always registered, or a service mark. So if you are known by a particular name and you can show that you have used it in that context, you would be able to register that, or if it matches a company name, depending on the jurisdiction where you come from. It must also not be a reserve name. There is a list of reserve names. We can provide that upon request. Those are names that won't be released by the registry. Also, the name mustn't deceive or cause material detriment to a significant portion of the insurance community, its customers or internet users. This is subjective, but it does give the registry, I would say, the mandate to refuse a name that they think would, put the particular industry into disrepute or could affect its reputation. It's very difficult to think of an example, Craig. I'm not too sure if you have an example of that, but maybe it could be we are the best company or insurer.insurance or something along those lines, maybe, or maybe a more generic name. Then it cannot be a country name, so that is like, I don't know if I had you on mute there, Craig. It can't be a country name, so for instance, United States.insurance or United Kingdom.insurance, and then no IDN. That means that you cannot register a .insurance domain name using foreign characters or non-Latin script, ASCII script, so that it doesn't support foreign languages. So it would have to be English for .insurance domain names. Then the process to register a .insurance domain name. If you have a registered trademark, and this is a trademark that is not an application, but is registered with the relevant trademarks office wherever you are based, so if you're in the US, that would be the USPTO, you would be able to have your mark validated with the Trademark Clearinghouse, or the TMCH. And I'll get into that in the next slide as well. But basically what that is a priority period for trademark owners to secure a domain name that matches their trademark before the domain name is released to the general public. And that's a very important phase, especially if you have a registered trademark already. That means the chance of you securing the name that you want is far greater than when it's released to every single insurance company or broker around the world. So we would stress the importance of participating in the sunrise phase for .insurance. Then once the trademark has been validated, we are a trademark clearinghouse agent, so we'd submit that on your behalf. Once that has gone through, you would need to then register your domain name with a registrar, which we are accredited as well. And what we have done now is we do have a queuing system. So once your mark has been validated by the Trademark Clearinghouse, we'll make sure all your information is correct and put it in our queuing system. So as soon as the domain name is opened or made available, we would submit the registration straight away. Once that is done, as Craig mentioned, Symantec will verify that information, that the information supplied is correct. This would be by email as well as a telephone call to the Human Resources Manager confirming that the contact on the domain name has the authority to represent the registrant. And VeriSign is the back-end provider of .bank in that they also handle the technical requirements of that. So working together, they make sure that the .insurance domain name complies with the particular restrictions. If you are successful, you've passed that phase, which you should after we pre-vet your information, your domain name is then registered and then you can use it. So that's the registration process in summary. Moving on to the Sunrise option. As I said, the TMCH is a viable option for those that have a registered trademark. If your trademark is a pending application or if you file your trademark now, you won't get into the Sunrise phase just because it does take a long time to register a trademark. In the US, it takes, I think, longer than a year to get through. The UK, around about 8 months. So it does take a long time. But if you do have a mark, the TMCH is the route to go through. So if you submit your mark through us, you can submit it for a 1-year validation, 3-year, or a 5-year validation, and that obviously has a different cost implication. We would suggest that if you only plan on registering a .insurance domain name to go for the 1-year validation, if you feel that you want to participate in the Sunrise period of other new GTLDs, which is possible, you can then go for the 3-year validation, which means then you can participate in the Sunrise period for 3 years after the trademark has been validated. It's very seldom that people go for the 5-year validation since the launches are coming to an end. So I think the 3-year validation or the 1-year validation is the correct option to go for in this instance. Then once that's done, or if you decide not to participate in the Sunrise but in subsequent phases, you will need to register an account with us. There's a link there, as you can see on the presentation. Once you've created an account and a handle is automatically created, this is the predefined set of information that we would use to submit your application to the registry. So it's very important that information is correct and accurate. You will be asked to validate your information as well as the email address. We would then check that that information is correct. Once it is correct, we'd issue you with an invoice, and then when that's settled, it would be placed in the queue. Then we would assist you in the verification with Symantec, because Symantec would require information from you sometimes through a corporate reshuffle or a change in name or one company acquiring the other. Sometimes information isn't readily available. So we will facilitate the process between Symantec and yourself. Sometimes Symantec will contact you directly to verify that information. So physical address, telephone number, the contact at the registrant to confirm that they have authority, as I said. The verification process can be quite smooth depending on the jurisdiction that you operate in. We find that if you're based in the US, it tends to move quite smoothly. Sometimes in Europe, Asia, it can be a bit more difficult since some companies don't have physical addresses. They have PO boxes, and that's not allowed, so you should have a physical address there. And now this verification process happens, as Craig said, upon applying or registering a domain name, and then upon the renewal or every 2 years thereafter. We would suggest that if you don't want to be burdened with the verification every renewal, rather go for a 2-year registration so that you then know once you've passed that, you only have to be re-verified in 2 years after that. Then if you pass that, all is good, your domain name is registered, ready for you to use. The launch timing for .insurance, they may change, but these are the dates we've been provided with. So from the 5th of May to the 8th of May, that's a qualified launch program. So that is reserved for founding members of FTLD who have trademarks in the Trademark Clearinghouse. So that wouldn't apply to the majority of insurance companies. Where it would really apply is the TMCH Sunrise. That's the 9th of May to the 8th of June. And that's first come, first served, which is very important. So that means if someone else has a registered trademark with the Trademark Clearinghouse that matches yours and they submit it before you get in, they would get the domain name before you. So it's very important to make sure that you have your mark in the Trademark Clearinghouse and in our queuing system so that it can be submitted and that you can be the first one to secure that domain name. Then after that is the Founders Program, and that is for founders that don't have trademarks in the clearinghouse, so they have an opportunity to secure domain names they want, and once again, that would not apply to the general insurance community. Then it's open to all insurance companies as well as any other entity that qualifies for .insurance domain name. And once again, that's also first come, first serve. So this is where maybe you don't have a trademark, or it's a company name, or it's a service mark that you use, or you're known by that name. This is the period that you would secure your particular domain name. We will also have a queuing system for that to make sure that we get in before anyone else. For .bank, we had a high success rate. I think it was in the 90s, 90%, about 95% that we secured during the GA stage for our clients. Obviously, the more generic or descriptive your name, the more chance that someone else would be applying for it. So that's why it's important to get in quite early. What does it cost for a .insurance domain name? It is more expensive. As you can see, it's $950 per year, and this includes the registration, our pre-vetting. We have all the security requirements in place that is imposed by FTLD. We have 24/7 support and a dedicated account manager that will manage the process with you. And it is an expensive domain name. It's obviously more expensive than a .com, but it obviously, as Craig mentioned, it has a more secure and a trusted element to it, as we can see with .bank, which has already launched. Also, the verification process does take time, so there's an added element to that. If for some reason your mark isn't submitted, say someone beats you to it, your full fee will be refunded. If it is accepted, but for some reason you do fail the verification process, there will be a partial refund on the fee for that. But it should, if you have submitted your application, it should go through because we do pre-vet that. So that was the .insurance presentation. You can contact us for a free .insurance strategy session where we would discuss the various options for you, get your application sorted, discuss how you would want to implement it from a technical perspective as well as from a branding perspective. So you have our contact details there. You can reach out to us and we would be willing to assist you with that. Marina would be the point of contact as well. So if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask them. I'd ask Marina just to read out the questions if there are any. Otherwise, you can reach out to us directly after this webinar.
It looks like there's no questions at this time.
Okay, great. So hopefully we've covered all aspects. And once again, thank you for attending, and we look forward to working with you on your .insurance domain names. Once again, thank you to Craig and Marina. Thank you.